Welcome back to Split the Party. As always, I'm your host, Steve Osmond, and today we're talking about a two-player game, Hive. Now, I've got the Carbon Edition here, which adds in a couple of the expansions, also changes the color scheme of the tiles, but the basic gameplay for Hive is exactly the same. It is a two-player game, and it's actually been referred to as nature chess. It's got a lot of that feeling into it. Now, you're creating the board as you go. Each player starts out with their queen bee. You have 4 turns. In your first 4 turns, you have to place the queen bee. Now, it doesn't have to be your first turn, but if by turn 4 you haven't placed it, then on your 4th turn, she has to go on the board. The rules for the game are that you can never place a tile next to an opposing tile. And on your turn, you can either place a tile or move a tile. Now, in the Carbon Edition, these are all black on white or white on black. It's actually my only complaint about the Carbon Edition. In the original edition of Hive, not only were each of the insects separately designed, but they were also color-coded so that they were easier to pick up. With the black on white, you can still tell the difference, but there's a little bit of a pause there, a little bit of a disconnect as you're trying to recognize the shape and make sure that that's the correct bug. It's a little bit easier with the shape and the color, but very small complaint. So each of these bugs moves slightly differently. For instance, mosquitoes. Mosquitoes can copy the ability of any bug that's next to them. Now that can be any opposing or friendly bug. So I could use the power of this ant, of this beetle, of this ant. Once they've moved, say he ends up over here, now on your next turn, he can only use the power of this grasshopper because that is who he is next to. The powers all affect movement. They're all, for the most part, bugs can only move along edges. They can only make legal moves into, for instance, you could move into this space because you can physically move the tile into this space. However, if I had tiles there, I could not move a tile into that space because it won't fit without displacing another tile. So that is an illegal move. I can't move in there unless I have some way that allows me to either jump or go over top. And each of the bugs has their own rules for movement, just like in chess. It's very simple to understand each of the individual bugs. It's very complex to understand how they're all going to relate together. And again, unlike chess, you don't have a board starting out. You have an open table. One person plays a tile, and the only time in the game that the rules about placing next to opposing characters can be broken is on the second player's first turn. They'll place one tile adjacent to the opposing figure. From that point on, you can only be adjacent to your figure. I couldn't place here because I'm adjacent to his. I could place there, or any of these 3 spots here. So you're building the board as you go, and the board is morphing. Some of the insects will allow you to move over top. So you may have bugs laid out like this, and then this one moves away and ends up over here, leaving this space empty. Something could move in there. It may obstruct another bug's movement. So you are constantly paying attention to not only where you're going, but what gaps you're creating and what bugs you're leaving adjacent to other bugs. Now the game ends when one of the player's queen bees is completely surrounded. It doesn't have to be completely surrounded by opposing bugs. It can be surrounded by anything. But once that queen bee is completely surrounded and has no adjacent spaces open, the game is over and the other player wins. So that is literally all you're trying to do, is you're trying to move your bugs into place, maybe manipulate their bugs a little bit into going into place there, and take advantage at the last moment to hop in there, fill those gaps, and surround that queen bee to end the game. It is, much like chess, it's a very deep thinking game. It's a lot of fun to really sit down. I've played it with a number of different people. I played it with young kids. I've played it with older people. And everybody sort of goes after it in a different way. And also like chess, there's that essence of learning your opponent, learning how they like to move, where their aggression levels are, maybe what bugs are their favorite, which ones they prefer to use. It's a fantastic game to play one-on-one. Two-player games can sometimes be for some people can be a little bit more difficult to pull off because they've got larger groups. For other people, 2 players are the sweet spot. They've got themselves and maybe their spouse, or themselves and their best friend that they play games with. In either group, I would say Hive is definitely a good game to pick up. It fills that niche of the classic board games, chess, checkers, things that we've been playing for years, while giving it a little bit of a rich and fresh feel, and giving a little bit more options, a little bit more thought. I thoroughly enjoy this game, and it's one that I'm glad to have added to my collection. I think you should add it to your collection too. But for today, that's all the time I'm going to have. So I'd like to thank our sponsors, Excelsior Games and Comics, Dual Bus Design, and Sound G Entertainment. And I'll see you out there in the Nerdverse.